The New Orleans Saints are in prime position to improve from average to above average in 2024. And the one thing that they could do to help themselves, they did it this offseason. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network on SI. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're joined by FTN Fantasy Chief Analytics Officer and creator of DVOA, one of my favorite football metrics, Aaron Schatz. And Aaron is going to help us take a look at a couple of different things. We're going to take a look at the defense, why the secondary is still very much the strength, why the New Orleans Saints are better than general NFL fans might think going into 2024, and how the Saints are equipped right now thanks to one big change this offseason that they made to go from average to above average for not only themselves, but in many people's eyes, quarterback Derek Carr as well. Aaron's going to help us break all of that down and much more on today's episode of Locked On Saints. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen of the day and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more all summer long. FanDuel is giving all customers a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. That means that there's something new every day for everyone all summer long. There we go. Over at FanDuel.com. Go and check them out today to get started. So, look, Aaron is incredible. One of the smartest minds in football, if you ask me. He has been a big-time influence on this show in terms of numbers, research, all that other stuff. He right now has his fantasy almanac that has come out over at FTN. Some pre-orders are available over on Amazon. You're going to be able to find out more information as well at FTN Fantasy. So please make sure you go and check all of that work out. They have done an awesome job. And one of the reasons why we've been able to bring you some advanced numbers to this show. So highly recommend going to go and check out the FTN Football Almanac. There is a digital version available now, hard copy coming out here soon. So we're going to be joined by him. And one of the first things that I broke down and that I wanted to ask about was where Derek Carr is, right? Who is Derek Carr? Who was Derek Carr as a quarterback back in 2023? And how did the New Orleans Saints get better than that in 2024? We certainly saw better than it began toward the end of the season. So how do they maintain that? And while there were a couple of things that they could have done, O-line, add new weapons, all of that, one of the things that Aaron's going to point out here is the adjustment at offensive coordinator in bringing in Klint Kubiak and the importance of his attachment to the Kyle Shanahan system. So we're going to start off by Derek Carr, looking at Derek Carr here, and then kind of looking at where Klint Kubiak brings in his influence and how he potentially has that improvement impact on this New Orleans Saints team. So the first thing that I ask is, what kind of quarterback Derek Carr was in 2023?
A little bit better than average. He had a pass DVOA of 8.2%, which was 17th out of something like 35 guys. A little bit above
literally right
average.
there in the middle. Yeah.
That's what he is basically every year. He's average. His sack rate was average. His completion percentage above expectation tends to be about expectation. He's a very average NFL quarterback. It's sort of, this is going to come up a lot talking about the Saints today. My basic feeling about the Saints on the whole is that they are an average team that most fans across the country mistakenly think is bad.
And when you look at a team that is average, so, okay, let's keep the conversation to Derek Carr for just a sec around an average quarterback, right? What elevates an average quarterback, a quarterback that has been consistently average? What potentially makes him better, and how have the New Orleans Saints potentially addressed that this offseason?
I mean, they haven't.
Okay.
Right? Because he's not going to suddenly start making tons of plays outside of structure.
Right.
So the best thing that would help him would be to dramatically improve the offensive line, or to to dramatically improve the receivers. I mean, I guess there's a third option, which is to improve the scheme, and that they did address.
Sure.
Right? They brought in Klint Kubiak, and there's no question. I mean, I have a little bonus in my projection system now for anybody who comes off the Shanahan and McVay trees, because if you look at the history, those offenses tend to do better than you would think otherwise based on all other variables. So they, the Shanahan-McVay tree thing is real, and Klint Kubiak literally comes off that tree like his family
Right.
literally is the tree. So that they addressed, but there's changes on the offensive line, but I don't think it's necessarily better. And obviously the receivers, there's a big question here about who the third, fourth receivers are. Are those guys going to be any good? Michael Thomas is gone. Not like he was great shakes last year, but they didn't bring in a guy where you're like,
right.
wow, that's the big receiver. That's Olave's big new partner. There is nothing like that. So I feel like the most likely result is that you're going to get something similar to what Derek Carr has been, which is a little bit above average. I mean, when you add in the Klint Kubiak, factor, you get a little bit above average.
Yeah. I noticed in the FTN Almanac that you helped put together over at FTN, or that helped put together, but that you researched over at FTN, that one of the things that could potentially elevate Derek Carr is yards after catch. And that is something that has been a part of what the Shanahan tree systems have brought in, but the New Orleans Saints wide receivers haven't proven to be yards after catch receivers. So do those two things kind of cancel each other out, or can you see maybe one of these receivers becoming a greater yards after catch threat in a scheme that emphasizes that?
That's sort of the interesting question, right? Isn't A.T. Perry or Cedric Wilson supposed to maybe be the yak guy? That's the guy who's going to get the yards after the catch.
Yeah, that's kind of the hope. And then, of course, Rashid Shaheed as well.
More of a deep threat or contested catch. And so maybe there's those guys, the third, fourth guys, those are the yak guys. It's an interesting question because they don't have receivers that are known for yards after the catch.
Right. Yeah. So even though the scheme can elevate that, if you don't have the players that can do it, then you simply don't have the players that can do it. Could be really interesting too. A young rookie like Bub Means that maybe fits that role as well. But certainly those are things that we'll have to kind of wait and see. So a couple of bold statements there from Aaron. I mean, even just looking at the New Orleans Saints as an average team, but understanding them to be above average in his own eyes. And he's going to clarify a little bit of that here in just a moment. But one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I highlighted from that conversation, or from that part of the conversation, is the importance of yards after catch. We've been talking about that for weeks here on the show. We were looking at some of Aaron's numbers in an episode from last week as well that kind of give you that same thing. And I kind of wanted to end that part of the conversation there on purpose because there's news around the New Orleans Saints. And so I brought up Bub Means, right? New Orleans Saints rookie wide receiver, is one of the guys that might be able to contribute as a yards after catch threat, depending on if he's able to grow in that role. I still think Rashid Shaheed's really the guy that's going to provide that, and how the system elevates Rashid Shaheed, elevates yards after catch opportunities, and then how that in turn elevates Derek Carr. And so I think all of this kind of feeds into one another. But I do know one of the big questions right now is everything okay with Bub Means? So before we jump into the next part of the conversation here, I wanted to mention Bub Means starting off after reporting. Remember, Saints rookies reported on Tuesday, the 16th, for training camp. And in the process of that, they put Bub Means on the non-football injury list. I've asked around a lot. I haven't gotten any specific detail about what it is that landed him there, but I have been told that this, as have many other reporters as well, have been told that this is not a major concern, is the quote that was used for me. So it could be a minor concern, it could be a moderate concern, but what I've been told is that it's not a major concern. Nick Underhill over at New Orleans Football providing additional context that they expect that Bub Means will undergo a conditioning test soon to try to get off that list quickly. He can come off the list whenever he wants. The only time that you're in a situation where you are required to miss any time in NFI is if you start the season on that list, but it doesn't look like that will be in the cards for Bub Means. So some good news there. So I want to just give you that update very quickly before we continue on with this conversation here. So coming up next, Aaron, believe it or not, even though there were some moments in the first segment that it might surprise you to hear this, is actually high on the New Orleans Saints. The challenge is that the New Orleans Saints, when you're high on them, it doesn't necessarily mean you think of them as a Super Bowl contender. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. If you are a small business owner, you know that every hire comes with some high stakes when it comes down to that. You're trying to make sure that you're building the most efficient and professional team possible. So you're going to want to hire like a professional as well. And that's why LinkedIn is absolutely the place that you should be going. LinkedIn users that are there, that head over to look for jobs, 70% of them don't even visit other leading job boards. So if you want to hire, make sure you're hiring in the right place. And that is LinkedIn Jobs. In fact, if you're a small business, look, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours of posting their jobs. It helps you hire professionals like a professional over at LinkedIn. And they give you a bunch of resources to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward. They find ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write up job descriptions, making the process of publishing and posting your job even faster and easier. So go and check them out today. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, family. The truth of the New Orleans Saints through Aaron's eyes and his advanced analytics is that the Saints are a better than average team that's being mistaken as a mediocre team by the general NFL fan base. Is that true? We're going to break this all down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. We appreciate you very much making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 stream, bringing you all the biggest stories from around the world of sports with the Locked On local experts that actually cover the teams. They're not accidentally talking about players that have been retired for half a decade. They're not accidentally talking about coaches that haven't coached for them for more than a decade. Also, they actually know what's going on with their team, just like we actually know what's going on with the New Orleans Saints here on Locked On Saints. Make sure you go and check that out over on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 stream, which you can find on Locked On Sports Today's YouTube page, as well as on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app as well, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So what I wanted to get to the bottom of next with Aaron's help was just kind of looking at what's the outlook of the New Orleans Saints? Where are they going into 2024? So when I asked him about the outlook, he had some positive things to say, although those positive things don't necessarily sound like a promise to the New Orleans Saints to reach the promised land in February, playing here at home in the Superdome.
My outlook is I'm basically driving the New Orleans Saints bandwagon, not necessarily in the way that Saints fans would want me to. I will tell you, I brought my Saints little people for the show to show how I'm driving the Saints bandwagon.
There you go.
Look, I think that the Saints, I'm going to damn them with faint praise. I think the Saints are a mediocre team. I think they're kind of boring to fans around the league, which is why fans tend to mistake them for bad, but they're not bad. And they have a very easy schedule in an easy division. And when you combine an average team that should, if the McVay-Shanahan family tree effect takes effect, should be a little bit better on offense. With a very easy schedule and the fact that we're not big believers in the Atlanta Falcons, because their defense is poor, you end up with a team that we think is going to win their division, has the best chance of winning their division, and could win 10 games.
There you
and
go.
Then lose in the first round of the playoffs. Which, I mean, is not, I'm not driving the bandwagon all the way to the Super Bowl. I'm not saying New Orleans is going to the Super Bowl in their own building, nothing like that. But I think people who dismiss this team as, well, New Orleans sucks, they're going to go 6-11, that are not paying attention to who's on this team and who they're playing. And what their schedule is like. And I mean, I'll give you an example in our simulations. We have Buffalo as, I think, the 5th or 6th best team and New Orleans 15th. But because of schedule, because the Bills have the hardest projected schedule and the Saints have one of the easiest, the Saints actually have an average of more wins than the Bills.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I see what you're getting at there. Yeah, so the circumstances present themselves as advantageous for this team to get back to the playoffs in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, Tampa Bay is still a kind of average team also, but their schedule is not as easy as New Orleans is. And again, I'm not Atlanta. I don't quite know what to expect out of Cousins, and their defense looks bad.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's take a look at another thing that helps out the quarterback. That's not necessarily the quarterback, but the run game. This was a place where the New Orleans Saints, both the offensive and defensive side, struggled in 2023, excuse me. This Klint Kubiak offense coming in, the Shanahan style offense coming in, obviously wants to predicate itself in the outside zone offense, which doesn't mean they're going to run that 100% of the time, right, Aaron? It's just a greater emphasis on those areas of the game. How do you see that potentially complementing, elevating? How do you see that sort of having an impact on the Saints' run game in 2024, especially with the offensive line still in question?
By my numbers, the run game was not bad last year. In DVOA, the Saints ranked 11th running the ball. Right? Like they were reasonable. The offensive line was 7th in a stat we call adjusted line yards, which cuts runs at certain distances to try to separate the blocking from the running backs, what the running backs do in the open field. The Saints were very poor in the open field. They didn't have a lot of big highlight 10 plus yard runs. That's what they were missing.
Yes.
Now, I don't know what the Kamara contract situation is right now.
Yeah.
But I don't see any reason why, with the Klint Kubiak offense, why this team should not probably have a similar running game this year, which is that they should be above average in efficiency, but struggle to they necessarily, they're going to get holes, but Kamara doesn't necessarily have the oomph to get those big highlight runs.
So maybe that's where you're hoping for, if you're the New Orleans Saints, the young guy in Kendre Miller to stay healthy and be able to continue to contribute. And I imagine that some of the production success that you were able to chart last year may have also been tied a bit to Taysom Hill, because like we're talking, that's the one guy, right?
There's no question about it. And that's another interesting thing about is that I think some of us, Taysom Hill, because we're frustrated with the idea of Taysom Hill as a quarterback, I think we tend to criticize when the Taysom Hill as Taysom Hill is very useful.
Yes, right.
Like as long as they're not futzing around with him as an actual starting quarterback, this hybrid thing he does and the Wildcat work. Right? We have in the Wildcat last year, which is we that's how we tagged the Taysom Hill as quarterback plays now.
Yep.
They had a 15% above average DVOA on those plays. The Taysom thing works.
Yeah.
As long as you're not expecting him to be a real quarterback, it works.
Yeah. This is one of the big things that I think a lot of Saints fans are hoping for going into 2024 is that, Aaron, when you see that 15% above and that success with that what you're seeing a lot of times in terms of game flow is a big game, and then he disappeared for 2 or 3 games and wasn't a part of the game plan anymore. And so I think that the hope here going into 2024 is that more consistent usage of that efficiency will lead to greater success in 2024 by effectively just keeping him on the field.
Yeah, I mean, he's actually not a bad receiver either.
Right.
His numbers as a tight end are pretty good too. Like there's value in him doing his thing, and especially in short yardage. Like he converts short yardage. The Saints run in short yardage more than most teams, and they have success doing it. And yeah, it's the Taysom thing works as long as you don't think he's a real quarterback.
Now, flipping over the defensive side, when it came to the run game, how did the Saints' run defense grade out for you? Because I know looking at sort of the league rankings, things weren't as improved as they have been in the past.
They come out a little bit below average. They were 12th against the pass and 23rd against the run last year in defensive DVOA.
So when you're looking at the pieces that they have added, not a lot of turnover over the course of that defensive line, not a lot of talent added to the defensive line, but there are a lot of guys going into their second years in the system. Brian Brzee, his second year in the NFL. There's
not typically a lot of see deleted from the defensive line too, though?
Right,
that's the thing, right?
Not a lot of change.
Here's the same thing we had last year when we were average. Same guys. Here we are. So pretty average.
If you recall, do you ever sort of typically see a leap in first to second year kind of players in this environment at all? Or is it just kind of on a case-by-case basis? Like
I think it's a case-by-case basis. I think in general, you can expect guys to be better in their second season than in their first. Running back may be the one exception to that, but otherwise, I think you can expect guys to be better in their second season than their first. But how much better is varies widely.
So, what is it that the New Orleans Saints are going to have to rely on over on the defensive side to be able to make sure that they are performing to that above average standard? That's what we're going to dive into next with Aaron Schatz of FTN Fantasy here on the Locked On Saints podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, where you can make every moment more. The MLB still rolling along, the WNBA hotter than ever, the Olympics on the way as well. So there's going to be a ton for you to check out over at FanDuel. And what will make it even better is that this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a free boost or bonus daily. That means that there is something for everyone every day, all summer long, over at FanDuel.com. That's where you're going to go to make the most out of your summer. You think that Derek Carr is going to throw for over 3,300 yards this season? You can bet on that. You can check out Chris Olave's receiving yards, receiving touchdowns. If you think Chris Olave is going to be a double-digit receiving touchdown getter, you can even bet on that as well. And of course, every line, every week, all season long over at FanDuel. And with MLB in action right now, stuff you can already get into and start raking in some of that cash this summer. So head over to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. It's no mystery that the New Orleans Saints defense is led by, Demario Davis, and its secondary, including star players like Marshawn Lattimore, Tyrann Mathieu, guys that should be in the star conversation already, like Paulson Adebo as well, and some other very solid players like even Alontae Taylor and perhaps Kool-Aid McKinstry. Whether that's sooner rather than later remains to be seen. But the New Orleans Saints in good position when it comes to their defense. And as Aaron and I move on here, we're taking a look at the New Orleans Saints passing defense and how that passing defense grades out across, particularly in the secondary when it comes to corners across the entire league, and where they can maybe get a little bit of help this year from their pass rush. Diving into all that here as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Don't forget, we are your team every day, so we'll be back here tomorrow with another episode. I want to dive into when the New Orleans Saints stopped using screen passes as a core part of their offense. What I learned in terms of when this turn actually happened might surprise you, because I think we think it's recent. It's not. Come back tomorrow to learn a little bit more about that, as well as our Friday deep dive. We're going to dive into some of the core concepts of who the New Orleans Saints, or what the New Orleans Saints offense used to look like, and when some of those things started to maybe peter out and go away, and how they might be able to come back, or whether they will come back in 2024 with Klint Kubiak. Be sure you come back for that. So we're into our deep dive season here as we continue on and get ready for training camp. I want to continue here with Aaron Schatz from over at FTN Fantasy. Remember that FTN Football Almanac on sale right now for pre-order. You can get the hard copy over at Amazon. There'll be a link in the description. And of course, you can check out ftnfantasy.com for even more. What I want to dive into here, though, is that New Orleans Saints secondary. And I asked Aaron one simple question to get us started. How did this New Orleans Saints secondary grade out when it came to his DVOA metrics, including a brand new metric that he unveiled just with this new football almanac?
Pretty good. They don't bring a lot of pass pressure, right? They were 28th in pressure rate on defense. Mm-hmm. Some guys in the secondary come out. We have this new coverage DVOA that I premiered in this book, which is based on every coverage snap. And Lattimore was 17th in the league.
Okay.
Adebo was 44, but it's out of over like 90 guys. So that's above average.
Right. Yep.
Taylor was 72nd.
Okay.
So, different results for different guys. And here's the thing. It's difficult for analytics because cornerback is super important, but it's super inconsistent from year to year. So it's hard to predict how good cornerbacks will be next year compared to how good they were the year before by using stats like this. So I'm telling you how these guys were last year. It's not necessarily a statement of how good they're going to be this year.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And you have a guy like Alontae Taylor in that, who ranked in the 70s there, that was playing in the slot for really the first time ever. I mean, going back to college, he had never played in the slot. So here he was playing in the slot for the first time. the Saints have said, ideally, the ceiling of what we saw from him last year should be the floor of what you see from him this year.
His success rate on targets was above average. It's just they threw at him all the time.
Yeah. So
that's why his
picked on
DVOA
quite a
didn't
bit.
come out great, because they threw at him all the time.
Okay. So, but overall, in terms of the success rate that he allowed, he was able to keep that down.
Yes.
Yes. So he's finding that success, or up. Sorry, up. Yeah, his success rate was up. Understood. So that ends up putting him in a situation to where it's like, okay, yeah, he's getting picked on, but he's not losing a lot of success off of those opportunities.
He's a little bit above average on the success rate. So it kind of average on the yards allowed per target, and so he would get targeted a lot, but he wasn't bad in particular when he was targeted. And I mean, obviously, guys had a lot of they had 3 guys with 14 or more passes defensed. Like they were doing things in coverage. Yeah.
So let's look at the team sort of. We'll focus out a little bit more. Looking ahead to 2024, we talked about the roster not necessarily making the biggest improvements. They kind of leaned on the coaching staff, trying to make improvements there here going into 2024. Where would you expect to see improvement for this team, if at all, going into 2024 to allow them to be able to maximize those sort of fortuitous circumstances that we discussed earlier with the easy schedule in division?
I mean, the most likely thing is the offense gets a little bit better because of the system being the Klint Kubiak system. I mean, so the question I think you might be asking is, if they were to actually become a good team with good circumstances,
how do they
where
do that?
would the improvements? Okay. Things that make logical sense would be McKinstry having a good rookie year, Chase Young waking up, and finally fulfilling his talent, somebody really becoming that third receiver and taking a big step as a third receiver, and the rookie left tackle being good.
Yeah, that's huge.
Would all be big, huge additions to help them become a good team in good circumstances rather than an average team in good circumstances.
Yeah. And it seems like it would behoove them, based upon the going to the offensive line for a moment there to build off of that. One of the places where it looked like they sort of took a big dip in terms of pass protection was early downs versus late downs. And that is a spot where you absolutely would love to see them improve in 2024. Can you kind of lay that out a little bit?
Oh yeah. They're second in pressure rate on first and second down, but 21st on third and fourth down. I don't know what the technical aspects of that are. Right. So this is an example of how scouting and stats work together. I give you the stats and I tell you what. The scouting tells you why. So if we went and watched the film with someone who knows offensive line play, they might be able to see what was going on. Like why, like what were they doing? Were they doing something in obvious pass situations to make their sets more obvious, that pressure, they were allowing more pressure? I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah. It felt like there were a lot of times on those third downs in particular where Derek Carr was holding the ball quite a long time.
Right, and quarterbacks do make their own pressure. There's no question. Pressure rate has to do with quarterback, not just with offensive line. So yes, Carr could have been making his own pressure holding onto the ball. And that's, again, where I talked about earlier. He's not going to suddenly learn to not do all that. But overall, his sack rate was pretty average.
Yeah. It's a lot of average. It's a lot of average for this team. It's who they were. And look, those things can be impacted too by our wide receivers uncovering. What is the comfort in terms of window to throw, which felt like he got more comfortable with more closed windows towards the end of the season when this offense really started to get. Are you able to kind of see the trajectory of the difference between kind of the struggle early on in the season versus sort of that late last 5-game charge where this team was kind of operating?
I have to go look.
I just wonder if that was something that stood out to you.
It's the kind of thing where I'd have to go look and see and be like, oh, well, what changed? And I don't have it on the tip of my tongue or anything like that.
Yeah. It felt like there was just, maybe this is an eye test thing, right? And this might just be me being a little ridiculous, but so much of it just felt like oh, there's just a little bit more trust all of a sudden. Like there were tighter windows being thrown to, and wide receivers were just being given chances to go up and make plays. And they were going up and making those plays. I think that Saints fans would love to see maybe some bridge of that gap and carrying the momentum over from the end of the year last year into 2020.
I will say it's a couple years later, but when Cedric Wilson went to Miami, people thought that was a good signing. People were like, he did some good stuff in Dallas. This could be good. And then he just kind of got forgotten. Like he could be a play.
All right, y'all. One more big old thank you to Aaron Schatz. You can find more of his work over at ftnfantasy.com. You can find the link in the description for the hard copy of his FTN Football Almanac. What are some of the things New Orleans Saints used to be known for? When did those things sort of fall off? And then what could be back with Klint Kubiak and the 2024 New Orleans Saints offense? That's what we're going to dive in tomorrow. Once again, big thank you to Aaron. And as always, a big thank you to you for making us your first listen of the day, every day. For your second listen, make sure you go and check out Locked On LSU. Matt Moscona has been lighting it up over at SEC Media Days. Definitely worth your time to go and see what's going on over at Locked On LSU, which was on the football charts, high on the football charts when it came to listens and all other stuff. So make sure you go and check it out. Be a part of the party over there. And of course, you can go and check out Locked On Pelicans with my good friend, Jake Madison. We appreciate you very much as always, making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me in the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. I trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.